Get that thing off my landing zone. Ryan Cole kicked her rifle case off the edge of the platform before she could even reach for it. It hit the dirt 3 feet below with a sound that stopped every conversation on the base. Maya Carter climbed down after it. Alone, while 30 soldiers watched, Cole crouched down to her level, pointed 2 fingers at her face, and said it slow, the way men say things when they want to make sure every word lands. You are not a soldier. You are a mistake somebody made at a desk. She picked up her rifle, met his eyes, said nothing. That silence cost him everything. Before you continue, if you love stories about real courage and unbreakable character, please subscribe to this channel and follow this story all the way to the end. And drop a comment below telling me what city you are watching from. Right now, I want to see how far this story has traveled. Now let us go back to Redstone Outpost and to the moment that changed everything. The helicopter came in low over the ridge, hugging the terrain the way military pilots do when they do not want to give a sniper on the ground an easy shot. The rotors beat hard against the desert air, and the soldiers at Redstone Outpost heard it long before they saw it. A deep, rhythmic thumping that bounced off the canyon walls and rolled across the dry earth like thunder, looking for a place to land. Sergeant Ethan Wallace stood at the edge of the landing zone with his arms crossed and his jaw tight. He had been expecting this. For 2 days, Command had been telling him that additional support was coming. Additional support. Those were the exact words they used. He had asked 3 times what kind of support, and 3 times Command had given him answers that explained nothing. A specialist, a sniper attachment, someone with particular skills for your situation. Ethan Wallace had been in the Army for 11 years. He knew what vague answers from Command meant. They meant you were not going to like what they were sending you. He was right. The helicopter settled onto the dust and the cargo doors swung open and out stepped a single figure carrying a long rifle case in one hand and a small pack over one shoulder. No team, no additional gear, just one person. She was young. Mid-20s at most. She moved across the landing zone with the kind of walk that does not announce itself, not slow, not fast, just deliberate the walk of someone who is always thinking 3 steps ahead of where their feet are actually going. Her hair was tied back tight under her tactical cap. Her eyes were already moving, already scanning, already doing something that most of the men watching her had not even thought to do. She was already reading the ground. But nobody noticed that part. What they noticed was everything else. Private Ryan Cole was standing to Ethan's left, and he was the first one to say out loud what most of them were thinking. That's our reinforcement, Cole said. He did not whisper it. He said it full voice, completely comfortable with the fact that everyone around him could hear. Are you serious? They sent us a girl. The laughter came fast and loose, the way it always does when one person gives a group permission to be unkind. Some of the men just chuckled. A few laughed out loud. One of them, Ethan, never figured out exactly who made a comment about training videos versus real combat that drew more laughter than anything else. Ethan Wallace did not laugh, but he also did not stop it, and that was its own kind of statement. She reached him before the laughter fully died down. She set her rifle case on the ground, stood straight, and extended her hand. Petty Officer 2nd Class Maya Carter, she said. Navy SEAL sniper, Command sent me to support your defensive operation. Ethan looked at her hand, looked at her face, shook her hand once quick and businesslike. Sergeant Ethan Wallace, he said, this is my outpost. Those are my men. And in 4 days, we are all going home. So let's be clear about something right from the start. Petty Officer, we have a plan. The plan works. I don't need anyone coming in at the last minute and complicating what we have already built. Understood, Maya said. Good. I just need access to your observation logs, your perimeter reports, and about an hour to walk the ground. Ethan studied her for a moment. She was not arguing. She was not pushing back. She was simply telling him what she needed, the way a professional tells another professional what resources they require to do their job. There was something almost irritating about how calm she was. Cole, Ethan said, without looking away from Maya. Show her where she can set up. Give her the basic layout. Yes, Sergeant, Cole said. He said it with a smile that was just a little too wide. Cole led her across the base with his hands in his pockets and a tour guide's tone in his voice breezy and dismissive, like he was showing someone around a property he already knew they couldn't afford. Mess is over there, he said, nodding vaguely. Bunks are in the east building. Latrine is behind the generator shed. Observation posts are, well, we have observation posts, but they're staffed, so you probably won't need to worry about any of that. Who covers the northeast quadrant? Maya asked. Cole paused. What? The northeast quadrant? Who covers the elevated observation from that direction? Cole looked at her. We rotate through the standard OP positions. Northeast is covered in the rotation. From which position? From OP2. What's the distance from OP2 to the ridge at bearing 045, Saman? Cole stopped walking entirely. He turned and looked at her with an expression that had shifted from casual dismissiveness to something a little more defensive. I don't know the exact distance. Roughly. I don't know. Does anyone know? Cole's jaw tightened. We have covered this outpost for 5 months without a problem, ma'am. I think we know what we're doing. I'm sure you do, Maya said simply. Where are the observation logs? I took her to the logs and left without another word. Maya sat down with the logs and did not move for 2 hours. She read everything, every shift report, every weather notation, every entry that described what the soldiers on watch had seen or hadn't seen or thought they had seen. She read the mundane entries and the significant ones. She cross-referenced dates and times. She tracked patterns. She compared the entries from 2 weeks ago to the entries from 1 week ago to the entries from 3 days ago, and then she stopped. She went back and read one section again. Then she closed the logbook, picked up her rifle case, and went out to find high ground. The position she chose was a flat shelf of rock on the northwest corner of the base, not the highest point, but the point with the widest angle of observation toward the mountains. She unpacked her rifle with the practiced efficiency of someone who had done it thousands of times, set up her scope, and went still. And she began to watch. Private Olivia Bennett was the one who found her there an hour later. Olivia was 22 years old, the youngest person at Redstone Outpost, and her job was radio communications, which meant she spent most of her time listening to other people talk while trying to say as little as possible herself. She had a habit of noticing things that other people talked over. She noticed that Maya Carter had not eaten since she arrived. She brought her a bottle of water and a ration bar and set them down next to the rifle without saying anything, because she could see that Maya was in the middle of something that required concentration. Maya reached over without breaking her sight line and picked up the water. She drank half of it and set it back down. Thank you, she said quietly. Olivia sat down a few feet away. You've been up here a long time. Yes. What are you looking at? The ridge at bearing 045, and the valley that runs south of it, and the road that intersects the valley at the third switchback. Olivia looked in that direction. She saw mountains. She saw sky. She saw the long, empty stretch of desert that surrounded the outpost on every side, like the world was trying to keep something in. I don't see anything. I know, Maya said, a pause. Is that the problem? Maya finally lowered her scope and looked at Olivia. For just a moment, something shifted in her expression, not quite a smile, not quite surprise, but something close to recognition. Like she had been heard by someone she had not expected to listen. That's exactly the problem, Maya said. She put her eye back to the scope. For 5 months, she said quietly, the enemy has been active in this valley at irregular intervals. The observation logs show vehicle movement, foot traffic signal activity. Not constant, not predictable, but present, enough that your people noticed it and logged it. Right, Olivia said. The last entry describing any activity in the valley was 11 days ago. Olivia thought about that. Maybe they moved on. Maybe, Maya said, or maybe they stopped moving because they finished what they were preparing. The silence that followed was different from the silence before. It had weight to it. You think they're going to attack, Olivia said. I think the quiet means something, Maya said. And I think the ridge at bearing 045 is the key. From that position, a team with the right equipment could hit every critical point in this base. Communications, ammunition, command. All of it within range. All of it without any adequate counterposition on your current defense grid. Have you told Sergeant Wallace? Not yet. Why not? Maya was quiet for a moment. Because I want to be sure. If I go to him now, I have observation and pattern analysis. That's not enough for a man like Wallace. He needs something more concrete. She adjusted her scope slightly. So I'm going to get him something more concrete. She found it 40 minutes later. She found it in the way the light hit the ridge at exactly the wrong angle. A reflection brief and almost nothing, the kind of thing that is easier to miss than to catch. Most people would have written it off as heat shimmer or a piece of natural rock catching the sun. Maya knew what glass looked like from 1,000 meters. Someone on that ridge had optics. Someone on that ridge was watching. She packed up her scope, picked up her rifle case, and went to find Sergeant Wallace. She found him in the command building, bent over a map with two of his senior NCOs going over the evacuation plan for the fourth time that day. He looked up when she entered, and his expression said clearly that he had not been expecting her and was not entirely glad to see her. "Petty officer," he said, "something I can do for you." "Yes, Sergeant," she said, "I need 5 minutes." He glanced at his NCOs. They both found something else to look at. "You've got 3, he said. She laid it out for him cleanly and without drama. The pattern break in the observation logs. The 11-day silence. The optics reflection she had caught on the northeast ridge. The calculation she had done bearing distance, angle of attack, the specific points on the base that would be targeted. First, the sequence that a competent enemy commander would use to destroy Redstone Outpost's defensive capability in the minimum amount of time. Wallace listened. He did not interrupt. When she finished, he straightened up, crossed his arms, and looked at her with an expression she could not quite read. "That's a lot of theory," he said. "It's pattern recognition," she said, "and direct observation. You saw a reflection." "I saw optical glass at approximately 1,100 meters on the northeast ridge. Couldn't it be anything rock surface debris?" "It could be," Maya said, "but the angle was wrong for natural reflection. It was tracking, moving with the light to maintain line of sight to this position." Wallace looked at her for a long moment. "We have been here 5 months," he said. "My men know this ground. If there was a significant threat on that ridge, we would have identified it." "Sergeant, we have an evacuation in 4 days," he said, and his voice had found the tone that meant the conversation was over. "My job is to get 30 soldiers home safely, not to chase reflections on a ridge because a specialist who just arrived thinks she sees a pattern." Maya held his gaze. "Your defense plan has a gap. Every defense plan has gaps. Not like this one." Something moved in Wallace's eyes, not anger exactly, but something close to it. He was a man who had carried the weight of 30 lives for 5 months, and he had done it well, and he was not interested in having that record questioned by someone who had been on his base for less than a day. "Thank you for your assessment," he said, dismissed. Maya stood for 1 moment longer, not defiantly, not dramatically, just long enough to let him understand that she was leaving, because she chose to not, because she was running. Then she turned and walked out. Cole was waiting outside. He had clearly been listening through the window because he was wearing the same too-wide smile from earlier, and he leaned against the wall with his arms crossed like a man enjoying a show. "Tough crowd," he said. Maya walked past him without stopping. "Hey," Cole called after her. "No shame in it. Wallace doesn't take advice from veterans with 10 years of experience. You think he's going to take it from someone who looks like they just graduated." Maya stopped. She did not turn around right away. She stood with her back to him for just a moment, and when she turned, her voice was completely level. "How long have you been on watch rotations here?" she asked. Cole blinked. 5 months. "And in 5 months, how many times have you checked the sight line from the northeast ridge to this command building?" Cole said nothing. "How many times have you timed the angle of approach from the second valley switchback to the east perimeter wire?" "Nothing." "How many times have you noticed that the enemy pattern in this area shows a consistent behavioral shift, approximately 10 to 14 days before a major offensive action?" Cole's smile had gone somewhere else entirely. "I'm not here to impress you," Maya said quietly. "I'm not here to prove anything to anyone. I'm here because someone in this outpost is going to die if the northeast ridge isn't covered, and I am trying to prevent that. So you can keep laughing if you want, or you can help me." She did not wait for his answer. She went back to her observation position on the rock shelf, set up her scope, and kept watching. It was getting dark. The desert temperatures dropped fast after sunset, and the rock she was lying on turned cold within an hour of the sun going down. She did not move. She had a jacket in her pack that she did not put on because the slight discomfort helped keep her alert. She had been trained to understand that comfort was the enemy of awareness, and awareness was the only thing that kept people alive. She kept watching the ridge. At some point, she did not check her watch, but it felt like somewhere around 2 or 3 in the morning, she heard footsteps approaching from behind her, careful, quiet footsteps. Someone who was trying not to startle her, which she appreciated because snipers are not people you want to startle in the middle of the night. "It's Bennett," Olivia said quietly. "I'm coming around your left." "I see you," Maya said. Olivia settled into a crouch beside her. She had brought more water and what looked like an actual apple, which was either from a care package or Olivia's personal supply, and Maya appreciated it more than she would have expected. "You've been out here for hours," Olivia said. "Yes." "Wallace is still awake. I can see his light. He's going over the evacuation plan again." "Probably." Olivia was quiet for a moment. "He's not a bad man." "I know he's not. He's been carrying this for a long time. The responsibility, all of them." Olivia looked out at the dark mountains. "I think it scares him more than he shows. The idea that he might have missed something." Maya did not take her eye from the scope. "That's exactly why what I'm telling him is so hard to hear. Because if I'm right, then the gap has been there for 5 months, and he's been standing in front of it without knowing it, and 30 people have been one decision away from something catastrophic." Maya paused. "Nobody wants to hear that. Not from a stranger, not from someone who just walked in." Olivia thought about that. "Is that why you haven't pushed harder? You know you could push harder." "Pushing harder doesn't work with men like Wallace," Maya said. "The only thing that works is evidence. Real, undeniable evidence that he can see with his own eyes." She adjusted the scope slightly. "So I'm waiting for the evidence. And if it comes in the form of an attack." Maya was quiet for a long moment. "Then I'll be ready," she said. She said it simply, not bravely, not as a declaration. The way a surgeon says they're ready to operate because they have prepared for every variable they can control and accepted the existence of every variable they cannot. Olivia sat with her for another hour. They did not talk much. They did not need to. There was something in the shared silence of two people watching the dark that creates its own kind of communication and understanding that words would only interrupt. At some point, Olivia fell asleep sitting up, which was something that young soldiers learn to do in their first deployment and never quite unlearn. Maya pulled the jacket from her pack, not for herself, but draping it over Olivia's shoulders before turning back to the scope. And she kept watching. The ridge, the valley, the dark. She was thinking about the 11-day silence. She was thinking about the pattern that the logs had shown her. Not just the recent silence, but the longer shape of the enemy's activity over the past 5 months. She had been trained to see time as a weapon, to understand that the enemy plans on a schedule that is invisible until you know what to look for. And what she was looking for now was the moment when the preparation became the action, when the silence became the attack. She was thinking about Wallace and his evacuation plan, and the 4 days he believed stood between his soldiers and safety. 4 days felt like a long time when everything was going well. 4 days was nothing at all when something had already been set in motion. She was thinking about Cole, who had laughed at her, because laughing was easier than considering the possibility that something had been missed. She was not angry at him. She understood him. He was young and he was tired, and he was close enough to going home. That home had started to feel real. And the worst thing you can do to a soldier who can almost taste going home is tell him that the danger is not behind him. It is still ahead of him, directly ahead. She was thinking about all of this when her eye caught the movement on the ridge. It was small. It was brief. In the scope's thermal range, it read as a tiny shift of heat signature, the kind that could come from 100 different sources if you were not already primed to know exactly what you were looking for. Maya was primed. Her entire body went still in a way that was different from the stillness of patience. This was the stillness of recognition. The stillness of a predator who has found what it was hunting and now must decide in the next fraction of a second whether what it is seeing is real. She watched. The heat signature moved again, slightly, deliberately. The movement of something being repositioned, something heavy and mechanical being adjusted for angle and elevation. Not a person walking. Equipment being set up. She picked up the radio beside her and pressed the transmit button and said 3 words. "They're on the ridge." There was a pause on the other end. Then Wallace's voice rough with interrupted sleep and unconcealed skepticism. Petty officer, it is 3 in the morning. Sergeant, I have movement on the northeast ridge. Thermal signature consistent with crew-served weapon setup. Bearing 045 approximately 1,100 meters. A longer pause. I'm calling it in, Maya said. What you do with the information is your decision. She released the transmit button. On the rock shelf of the northwest corner of Redstone Outpost, Private Olivia Bennett woke up from the sound of Maya's voice and blinked in the darkness, and saw Maya lying absolutely still behind her rifle watching the mountain with an expression that Olivia had never seen on anyone's face before. It was not fear, it was not excitement. It was the face of someone who has spent years preparing for a single moment and who now understands with total clarity that the moment has arrived. Maya, Olivia said quietly. Maya did not look away from the scope. Wake up, Wallace, she said. Wake up, everyone. What's happening? Maya tracked the thermal signature on the ridge, watched it resolve into something more defined, watched the shape of it take on the unmistakable geometry of a weapon being positioned on a bipod. She calculated the distance, the wind, the angle of attack that would follow, the sequence that a competent enemy commander would use. She had calculated this exact sequence before. This afternoon, on a piece of paper in the observation log she had borrowed from the command building, she had written it out step by step. She had calculated the time from first shot to full engagement. She had identified the first target, in the second, in the third. She had been right about all of it. That knowledge did not feel like satisfaction. It felt like a heavy thing. Wake up, everyone, Maya said again. Right now. Olivia was already on her feet, already moving her boots, scraping on the rock as she ran. And Maya kept watching the ridge. And the ridge kept moving. And somewhere in the mountains above Redstone Outpost, the silence that had lasted 11 days was about to end. Wallace did not sleep after Maya's radio call. He sat in the command building with a cold cup of coffee and the evacuation plan spread out in front of him, and he stared at it without really seeing it. He had been commanding Redstone Outpost for 5 months. 5 months of rotating watches managing supply lines, keeping 30 soldiers alive in a place that was designed to grind people down. And in 4 days, it was supposed to be over. 4 days. He had counted them so many times the number had lost its meaning and become something closer to a prayer. 4 days. And now there was Maya Carter. He picked up the radio log and read her entry again. Movement on the northeast ridge. Thermal signature consistent with crew-served weapons setup. Bearing 045 approximately 1,100 meters. He read it the way you read something you want to disagree with, but cannot find the specific word to argue against. The language was precise. The coordinates were exact. She had not said maybe. She had not said possibly. She had stated it the way someone states a fact they have already verified twice. He set the log down and rubbed his face with both hands. Sergeant First Class Danny Reeves knocked on the door frame and leaned in. Reeves was Wallace's most experienced NCO, 41 years old, built like someone had assembled him out of spare parts in sheer stubbornness, and he had been with Wallace for 3 of the 5 months at Redstone. You're still up, Reeves said. So are you. Bennett came through the barracks about 20 minutes ago, telling people to wake up. She didn't say why, but the way she was moving. Reeves paused. What's going on, Sergeant? Wallace looked at the radio log, looked at Reeves. The SEAL thinks there's activity on the northeast ridge. Reeves was quiet for exactly 2 seconds. What kind of activity? She's calling it crew-served weapon positioning. Another silence, longer this time. You believe her? Reeves asked. I don't know what I believe, Wallace said. And that was the most honest thing he had said out loud in days. Reeves walked to the map on the wall and looked at it without touching it. He had a habit of doing that, reading maps with his eyes instead of his fingers, like he did not want to disturb whatever truth the map was holding. He found the northeast ridge, traced the line from it back to the outpost. His jaw moved slightly the way it did when he was calculating something he did not want to calculate. That's a bad angle, Reeves said quietly. I know. If she's right, I know Danny. Reeves turned from the map. So what do we do? Wallace did not answer right away. The question sat between them in the command building, and outside the window, the desert was black and completely silent, and somewhere out there in the direction of bearing 045, a Navy SEAL sniper was lying on a piece of cold rock watching a ridge that she was absolutely certain was not empty. We increased the watch rotation, Wallace said finally. I want 2 men on OP2 for the rest of the night, and I want someone with eyes on the northeast approach road. And the SEAL? Let her watch her ridge. Reeves nodded once. He started toward the door, then stopped. Sergeant, for what it's worth, Bennett said she saw the reflection too, on the ridge, this afternoon before it got dark. Wallace looked up. Bennett said the SEAL pointed it out, and she looked through the scope herself. She said it didn't look like rock to her either. Wallace said nothing. Reeves left. And Ethan Wallace sat alone with his cold coffee and his evacuation plan and the uncomfortable weight of a possibility he had spent the last several hours trying not to consider. What if she was right? What if the danger was not behind them at all? The morning came fast and hard, the way desert mornings do, the sun climbing over the eastern ridge like it had somewhere urgent to be, burning off the cold in less than an hour and replacing it with the dry, flat heat that the soldiers at Redstone had spent 5 months learning to move through. By 6 in the morning, the base was fully awake, and by 6:30, the news had traveled through every bunk and every watch station, the way news always travels in a small, closed community, quietly and completely, and with just enough detail to make everyone nervous. People were saying the new SEAL had seen something on the ridge. People were saying Wallace had dismissed it. People were saying she had been on her observation position all night. Cole heard all 3 of these things before he had finished his morning coffee, and his reaction to all 3 of them was the same. A short exhale through his nose and a shake of his head that said clearly he did not think any of this was worth taking seriously. He found Maya at her observation position at 0645. She had not moved from the rock shelf. She had her rifle scope up, and the jacket that should have been on her own shoulders was folded beside her. Except that it was not folded, it was bunched up in a shape that looked like it had recently been on someone else's shoulders. Cole looked at the bunched jacket, looked at Maya, did the math. You stayed out here all night, he said. Yes. And you gave your jacket to Bennett. Maya said nothing. Cole sat down on a piece of rock a few feet away. He did it without being invited, which was either confidence or habit, and he was quiet for almost a full minute, which was unusual enough for him that Maya actually noticed it. What did you see last night? He asked. And this time the tone was different. It was not the tour guide voice from yesterday. It was not the crowd playing performance from the landing zone. It was just a question. Movement on the ridge, Maya said. Thermal consistent with equipment positioning. What kind of equipment? Crew-served weapon, probably a heavy machine gun or an anti-armor system, possibly both. Cole looked out at the ridge. He could not see anything from here without a scope, which he knew and she knew he knew. How sure are you? 90%. And the 10%? The 10% is always there, Maya said. Anyone who tells you they're 100% certain about anything they see at 1,100 meters in the dark is either lying to you or lying to themselves. Cole absorbed that. He had the look of a man revising something he had already decided, which is one of the most uncomfortable things a person can do, and he was not enjoying it. I owe you an apology, he said. Maya lowered her scope and looked at him for the first time since he had sat down. She looked at him the way you look at something you want to assess accurately, not with warmth, not with coldness, just with attention. Yes, she said, you do. The landing zone and everything after it. Cole nodded. He looked at his hands. I have a sister, he said. It came out differently than he probably intended, less as an explanation, more as something that had been waiting for the right moment to exist out loud. She's in the Air Force. She's a loadmaster. Every time He stopped, started again. Every time I think about someone doubting her because of how she looks, he stopped again. I don't have a good reason for what I did. I just have an explanation. I know the difference, Maya said. I know you do. Cole stood up, looked at the ridge one more time. Is there anything I can do right now? Anything useful? Maya looked at him for a moment. Then she said, get me the last 72 hours of OP2's watch reports. The handwritten ones, not the typed summaries. And get me whoever was on watch at OP2 between midnight and 4 a.m. for the last week. Cole straightened slightly. That's a specific request. Yes, it is. I'll have it to you in 30 minutes. 20 would be better. He almost smiled, not the performance smile from yesterday. Something smaller and more real. 20 minutes, he said and left. He was back in 18. He brought the reports, and he brought a young specialist named Torres, who had covered the midnight to 4 rotation at OP2 for most of the past week, and he stood to the side while Maya talked to Torres in a way that was less an interview and more a careful excavation, pulling out details that Torres had noticed but not recorded at scenes that had seemed too small to write down variations in the darkness. Sounds that might have been wind or might have been something else. One night where Torres thought he heard vehicle movement in the valley but could not confirm it, so he left it out of the log. "Tell me about the vehicle movement," Maya said. Torres shifted his weight. He was 20 years old and had the look of someone who was suddenly aware that a thing they had decided was not important might actually be very important. It could have been anything. Wind carries sound weird out here. I wasn't sure enough to log it. What night was this? 4 nights ago, maybe 5. What time? Around 2 in the morning, maybe a little after. Maya wrote something in her notebook. She had a small black notebook that she had been carrying since she arrived, and she wrote in it with a mechanical pencil. Small and precise, the way someone writes when they are trying to capture something that is already starting to dissolve. Was it a single vehicle or multiple? Torres thought. Multiple, I think. It was hard to tell. The sound overlapped. Direction of travel. Northeast, away from the base, he paused. Or toward it, I couldn't tell which way it was going. But northeast corridor. Yes, Maya closed her notebook. Thank you, specialist, she said. You didn't do anything wrong by not logging it. But I need you to go back to OP2 right now and tell me immediately if you hear or see anything in the northeast corridor. Anything at all. Wind, a bird, a rock falling, anything. Torres looked at Cole. Cole gave him a small nod. Torres left. Cole looked at Maya. The vehicle movement 4 nights ago. It was them, Maya said, moving the equipment into position. You're sure 92%. Cole breathed out slowly. We need to tell Wallace. We do, Maya said, but this time I need you to come with me. Cole looked at her. Why? Because Wallace has already decided what I am, she said simply. He decided it the moment I stepped off that helicopter. Anything I say to him alone goes through that filter first. But if you walk in there with me, he'll know it's not just you anymore, Cole said. He'll know it's not just me anymore, Maya confirmed. Cole was quiet for a moment. He was doing the calculation that soldiers do when they are deciding whether to step across a line, not a moral line, but a structural one. The line between staying inside the established order and doing something that the established order might interpret as a challenge. He had laughed at her on the landing zone. He had made sure every man on the base knew exactly what he thought of her. And now she was asking him to walk into Wallace's office and say that she might be right. Okay, Cole said. They found Wallace at 0820 coming out of the MES building with Reeves. Wallace saw them together and something shifted in his expression, quick, barely visible, but there. He registered the fact that Cole was walking next to Maya Carter instead of 10 feet behind her, making a face at her back, and he registered what that meant. Sergeant, Maya said, new information. Wallace looked at Cole. You're here voluntarily. Yes, Sergeant, Cole said, a pause. Then Wallace said, talk. Maya walked him through it. The vehicle movement that Torres had heard 4 nights ago. The direction, the timing, the way it fit into the 11-day silence, not as an absence of activity, but as a conclusion of activity. The preparation was complete. The equipment was in place. The only thing left was the order to fire. She laid her notebook on the table between them. Wallace looked at the notebook, looked at Cole. You believe this? Cole met his eyes. I think we should take it seriously, Sergeant. Wallace picked up the notebook. He read through it slowly, carefully, the way he read everything, like he was looking for the sentence that would prove the argument wrong. He turned the page, turned it again, set it down. Even if everything in here is accurate, he said, and his voice had the tone of a man who is not conceding the argument, but is opening a window in the wall of it. Our evacuation is in 4 days. We are not in a position to launch a preemptive operation. We don't have the personnel or the authorization. I'm not asking for a preemptive operation, Maya said. I'm asking for 2 things. First, move the ammunition storage away from the east building. Right now, today, if they hit us from the northeast ridge, the east building is the second target after communications. If the ammunition is there when they hit it, we lose the ability to sustain any kind of defense. Wallace's jaw tightened. And the second thing, give me a counter position on the south roof. elevated with a clear sight line to the northeast ridge, and give me authorization to engage without waiting for a second confirmation if I identify a crew-served weapon preparing to fire. The room went quiet. Reeves was leaning against the wall and his arms were crossed, and he was watching Wallace with the patience of a man who has seen his commander make hard decisions before and trusts him to make them again, but who also knows that trust has to work both ways. You're asking me to give a specialist who has been here for less than 36 hours authorization to engage a target at 1,100 meters on her own judgment, Wallace said. I'm asking you to let me do my job, Maya said. Your job is support. Your job is to supplement our existing defense plan. My job is to keep people alive, Maya said. Sergeant, I understand why this is hard. I understand that you have carried this base and these soldiers for 5 months, and that the idea of someone coming in at the last minute and telling you there is a gap, I understand what that feels like. But I need you to hear me, not as a challenge to what you have built, as someone who is looking at the same situation from a different angle and seeing something you cannot see from where you are standing. Wallace looked at her for a long time. The silence in the room had texture. It had the texture of a decision being made not quickly, not easily, but with the full weight of what was at stake pressing down on every second of it. Move the ammunition, he said finally. Reeves get a team on it in the next hour. Reeves pushed off the wall. Yes, Sergeant. As for the counter position, Wallace stopped. He looked at Maya, and then he looked at Cole, and then he looked back at Maya. You get the south roof. Reeves will coordinate the sightline. But the authorization to engage, that goes through me. You identify a target, you radio it in, and I make the call. And if you are not reachable, Maya asked, then Reeves makes the call. And if Reeves is not reachable, Wallace's eyes were steady. Then you use your judgment, petty officer. And God help us both if you're wrong. God help us both if I'm right, Maya said. Nobody had a response to that. By noon, the ammunition had been moved. Cole organized the work crew himself, which was noticed by everyone and commented on by several people who had been at the landing zone yesterday and remembered clearly where Cole had stood and what he had said. He did not explain himself. He just worked efficiently and without drama. And when Private First Class Mendez made a joke under his breath about taking orders from a girl, Cole looked at him with an expression that stopped the joke before it finished. Get back to work, Cole said. Mendez got back to work. Maya was on the south roof by 1100. The position was not ideal. It was 3 meters lower than her preferred observation angle, and the parapet on the south side created a sightline obstruction at the far left edge of the northeast ridge. But it was significantly better than the northwest rock shelf, and she spent 45 minutes making small adjustments to her position until she had compensated for the obstruction as much as physics would allow. Olivia Bennett brought her food at noon, an actual meal this time, heated ration coffee, a small bag of crackers that Olivia had clearly extracted from her personal supply. You need to eat, Olivia said, not just crackers and apples. Thank you, Maya said. Olivia sat down with her own coffee and watched Maya eat without looking away from the scope. Wallace moved the ammunition. I know. That's actually a big deal. He hasn't changed anything on this base in 3 months. I know that too. Olivia turned her coffee cup in her hands. Cole is different today. Yes. What did you say to him? Nothing that wasn't already true, Maya said. I just said it at the right time. Olivia was quiet for a moment. Then she asked something that she had clearly been carrying since the night before. Maya, how many times have you been through something like this, where you saw something coming and nobody listened until it was almost too late? Maya chewed her food and thought about the question. She thought about the first time, which had been 3 years ago, in a situation that was officially classified and unofficially the thing she thought about when she could not sleep. She thought about the second time, which had ended better. She thought about the third time, which had not. Enough times to know the pattern, she said, and every time you were right. Not every time, Maya said. Once I was wrong, I called something that wasn't there. We changed the plan, we lost 6 hours, and the team was angry with me for a week. She paused. That week was important. It taught me the difference between being certain and being right. Those are not the same thing. Olivia absorbed that. But this time, Maya lowered her fork. She looked through the scope. She adjusted the focal point a fraction of a millimeter and held very still and looked at the ridge and at the valley below it and at the road that ran through the valley and at the specific point on the ridge where she had seen the thermal signature at 3 in the morning and where she had seen the reflection yesterday afternoon. "This time I'm not certain," she said, "but I'm right." The afternoon moved slowly. At 1:40, Taurus radio Ed from OP2 with a report of dust movement in the Northeast Valley. Inconclusive direction. Could be wind-driven, could be vehicle. He was watching it. Maya was already watching it. She tracked the dust for 11 minutes. It moved with too much consistency to be wind-driven. Wind-driven dust disperses, unevenly changes direction, loses density at irregular intervals. This dust was moving in a line, a column. Something was generating it from below. She radioed Wallace. "I have dust movement in the Northeast Valley. Possible vehicle convoy, bearing 045 distance approximately 2,000 meters from the ridge." Wallace's response came after 15 seconds. "Copy that. Can you confirm vehicle? Negative. Dust pattern is consistent with vehicle convoy, but I cannot visually confirm. Continue observation." She continued observation. At 14:18, the dust stopped. Not because the wind died, not because the vehicles had moved out of the valley. The dust stopped because whatever was generating it had also stopped, had parked, had reached a destination, and the destination was at the base of the Northeast Ridge. Maya did not radio this in immediately. She spent 4 minutes watching the area where the dust had stopped waiting, looking for the next piece of information that would complete the picture. In those 4 minutes, her heart rate did not change. Her breathing did not change. Her hands did not move. She had trained for this, specifically the ability to sit inside a moment of extreme certainty and not let the certainty become emotion before the information was complete. At 1:22, she saw a figure move out of the shadow of the ridgeline, then another, then a third. Too far for faces, too far for details, but close enough to read intention in posture and movement. These were not people wandering. These were people with a purpose in a timeline and a very specific destination at the top of the ridge above them. She picked up the radio. "Wallace, I have personnel movement at the base of the Northeast Ridge. 3 confirmed individuals, heading up the ridge on foot. This is not a patrol pattern. This is a resupply or reinforcement movement for the position above." A long pause, then Reeves's voice, not Wallace's. "Copy. Sergeant Wallace is on his way to your position." Wallace was up the stairs and on the south roof in under 2 minutes. He had a pair of binoculars. He stood next to Maya and raised them in the direction she had indicated. He looked for almost a full minute. "I don't see them," he said, "and they moved into the shadow of the ridge about 40 seconds ago, but they were there." He kept looking. "You're asking me to—" "I'm not asking you for anything right now," Maya said. "I'm telling you what I saw. You can do whatever you want with that information." He lowered the binoculars. He looked at her profile, her eyes still at the scope, her body completely still, her jaw set with the quiet determination of someone who has already accepted the full weight of being right. "What would you do?" he asked. "If you were me, right now, what would you do?" Maya considered the question. She considered it seriously because it deserved a serious answer, and because Wallace was asking it seriously, not as a challenge, not as a test, but as a man who was genuinely searching for the right answer and was willing to admit at least to one other person that he was not sure he had it. "I would go to DEFCON 2 for this outpost," she said. "I would double the watch rotation effective immediately. I would position your 2 best shooters on the west and east walls with clear sight lines to the northeast approach corridor, and I would get on the radio with command and request authorization for a fire mission on the ridge position contingent on confirmed hostile action." "Contingent on confirmed hostile action," Wallace repeated. "I'm not asking you to fire first," Maya said. "I'm asking you to be ready when they do." Wallace stood on the south roof for another 30 seconds. The desert was quiet below him. The mountains were still. There was nothing to see with naked eyes or binoculars that would definitively confirm what Maya Carter had been telling him for the past 36 hours. But he had moved the ammunition, and somewhere in the back of his mind, in the place where 11 years of experience lived, something was telling him that the woman lying next to him on this roof had a better view of what was coming than anyone else on this base. "Reeves," he said into his radio. "Go ahead, Sergeant. Double the watch rotation, effective right now. I want Harris and Kowalski on the east and west walls full kit, and I want them to stay there until I personally tell them to stand down." A pause. "And get me a line to command. Secure channel. Tell them I need to talk about contingency authorization." Copy that. Give me 5 minutes. Wallace lowered his radio and looked at Maya. You get your authorization. Contingent on confirmed hostile action. But I'm the primary call. If I'm down, Reeves. If Reeves is down, you call it yourself. Understood, Maya said. And petty officer. He stopped. He seemed to be searching for the right words, which was unusual for Wallace, who generally said exactly what he meant without searching for anything. If I'm right about this, the conversation we need to have is later, Maya said. Right now, I need to focus on the ridge. Wallace almost said something else. Instead, he nodded once. He went back down the stairs. Maya exhaled, slowly, completely. She reset her breathing and put her eye back to the scope and looked at the ridge that she had been watching for 36 hours. She was right. She knew she was right. And knowing that felt like carrying something very heavy in a very small space, because being right meant that before this was over, the people around her were going to be in more danger than any of them fully understood. Cole appeared on the roof at 15:30. He had 2 water bottles and a look on his face that was trying to be casual and not quite getting there. Wallace briefed the senior team, he said. Harris and Kowalski are in position. The watch rotation doubled 20 minutes ago. I know, Maya said. I can hear the watch changeover. Cole sat down. He did not make a move toward his weapon or the parapet. He just sat with his back against the wall and his knees up and his water bottle in his hands, and Maya understood that he was not there to help her observe. He was there because he was frightened and did not have anywhere better to put it. How do you do it? He asked. Do what? Stay that still. I've been watching you on this roof for 20 minutes. You haven't moved. Not once. Not even to shift your weight. Training, Maya said. No, Cole said. It's more than training. Training teaches you how. It doesn't teach you how to be that calm when you know something is coming. Maya was quiet for a moment. I'm not calm, she said. Cole looked at her. I'm controlled, she said. There's a difference. Calm means you don't feel it. I feel all of it. Every bit of it. The way you feel it. The same fear, the same weight. I just put it somewhere that doesn't interfere with what I needed to. Where do you put it? Later, she said. I put it in later. When this is done and everyone is safe and I'm sitting somewhere quiet, I'll feel everything I'm not feeling right now. That's when it comes. Cole thought about that. He looked at the ridge. And if later doesn't come, then it doesn't matter where I put it, Maya said simply. Cole had no response to that. They stayed on the roof as the afternoon turned toward evening and the sky over the mountains shifted from blue to the deep orange that the desert does at the end of the day. Olivia came up at 17:30 and sat with them. Reeves up at 1800 and checked the sight lines without saying much. Even Torres came up at 1815, technically off rotation, but unable to stay away, drawn up to the roof by the same feeling that had gathered everyone in the same place. The outpost was quiet. The mountains were quiet, and that quiet had a different quality than it had yesterday. Yesterday, the quiet had been something nobody was paying attention to. Today, the quiet was something everyone felt pressing against them from every direction. At 1900, Olivia's radio crackled. A sound. Brief. Almost nothing. Not a voice, not a signal, just a sound, the kind that equipment makes when it is not quite ready to make a larger sound yet. Maya heard it. She was already at the scope. Radio check, she said to Olivia. Right now, all positions. Olivia keyed her radio. All stations, this is Redstone, actual radio, check over. The responses came back. OP1, OP2, East Wall, West Wall, command building. And then on a frequency that was not Redstone's frequency but close enough to bleed through came something that was not a response. It was a number, in a language that was not English. Olivia looked at Maya. Maya looked at Olivia. And in the 3 seconds between hearing that number and understanding what it meant, the last thin wall between preparation and reality came down completely. Get Wallace, Maya said. Her voice was level, completely level. Right now. What was that? Cole said. He had heard it too. A countdown, Maya said. She put her eye back to the scope and found the ridge and found the position she had been watching for 36 hours. And in the last light of the desert evening, she saw what she had been waiting for. Movement. Real, unmistakable, deliberate movement. The preparation was over. Get Wallace, she said again. Tell him it's tonight. Wallace reached the south roof in 90 seconds. I was still pulling his body armor over his head when he came through the roof access door, and Reeves was right behind him, and behind Reeves were Harris and Kowalski abandoning their wall positions because the radio had said south roof, and every trained instinct they had pointed them in the same direction as every other person on the base. "Talk to me," Wallace said. "Foreign language transmission on a bleed frequency at 1900 hours," Maya said. She did not take her eye from the scope. "Numerical sequence." Olivia confirmed it was a countdown format. "I have movement on the northeast ridge bearing 045 consistent with a crew-served weapon being unsecured from a transport position and repositioned for firing." Wallace raised his binoculars. "I can't see movement." "The light is wrong for binoculars. You need the thermal scope." "I don't have a thermal scope up here." "I know," Maya said. "That's why you need to trust me." The word trust landed in the middle of the roof like something physical. Everyone heard it. Everyone felt it. Wallace held his binoculars up for another 5 seconds. Looking at a ridge he could not read in the dying light, and then he lowered them and made a decision that 11 years of command had been building toward without him knowing it. "Reeves," and he said, "get everyone to defensive positions. Full alert, right now." Reeves was already moving. You heard him. Move, move, move. The roof emptied in seconds. Cole and Torres and Kowalski and Harris all going down the stairs at once, the sound of boots on metal, and then boots on dirt, and then voices calling across the base in the controlled urgency of men who have trained for this moment, but are now discovering that training and reality are two completely different temperatures. Only Olivia stayed. She was crouched at the base of the parapet wall with her radio equipment because her job was communications, and communications happened here. Wallace stayed too. He stood 2 feet behind Maya and watched the base come to life below him and listened to Reeves on the radio coordinating positions, and he said nothing for 45 seconds. 45 seconds is a long time when you are standing on a roof waiting for something to happen. Then he said, "How long?" "I don't know," Maya said. "The countdown was at a stage I couldn't fully interpret. Could be minutes, could be less. Could be hours." "No," Wallace absorbed that. "What do you need from me?" "Stay off the radio unless it's critical. Every transmission competes with what I'm listening for." A pause. "And when the time comes, don't hesitate on the authorization. Every second matters." "Understood." At 1911, the first explosion hit the eastern perimeter. It came without warning. No final radio transmission, no sound of an inbound round, nothing that gave the human nervous system time to prepare. One moment the base was in controlled alert. The next moment, the eastern perimeter wall was gone, replaced by fire and dust and a concussive wave that rolled across the base and hit every person standing upright like a hand pushing them backward. Wallace grabbed the parapet. Olivia dropped flat. Maya did not move. "Contact east," Reeves's voice on the radio tightened fast. "Repeat, contact east. IED or mortar strike east perimeter wall is down. We have casualties. I need medic at east position right now." Wallace keyed his radio. "All positions hold. Return fire only on confirmed targets. Do not expose." The second explosion hit before he finished the sentence. This one was closer. The south building 40 meters from the roof they were standing on. The impact shook the structure beneath their feet, and Maya felt the vibration travel up through the concrete and into her elbows. And she adjusted her grip on the rifle and kept the scope on the ridge and kept breathing and kept looking. "They're sequencing," she said. "East wall first to pull attention. South building second to suppress the command position. The ridge fires next." "How do you know the sequence?" Wallace said. "Because it's the sequence I would use," Maya said. "Get down, Sergeant. Right now, get behind the parapet wall." Wallace went down. He hit the concrete on his knees and pressed his back against the parapet, and Olivia was already there beside him. Radio in both hands relaying position reports with a voice that was shaking, but functional, shaking and functional, which is what training gives you when fear tries to take over. On the ridge at bearing 045, at a distance of approximately 1,100 meters in a firing position that had been prepared over the course of 11 days in silence while 30 soldiers waited to go home, the enemy crew-served weapon came to life. The sound reached the base a fraction of a second after the rounds did. The eastern wall, already compromised by the first explosion, took the main burst. But the angle of fire was shifting. Maya could see it through the scope, could track the adjustment of the barrel as the enemy gunner walked the rounds toward the communication building, toward the command building, toward the exact sequence she had drawn out on paper 36 hours ago and handed to a man who was not ready to believe it yet. They're walking it west, Maya said. Communications is the next target. Olivia. Here, Olivia said. Get your equipment off this roof. Get it inside the command building. You have maybe 45. I'm not leaving you. Olivia. Maya's voice was not loud. It was not harsh. It was the voice of someone delivering a fact that is not negotiable. Your radio is the only thing keeping this base connected to command right now. If you stay up here and that equipment takes around 30 people lose their ability to call for support. Go. Olivia looked at Wallace. Wallace looked at Olivia. Go, he said. Now. Olivia grabbed her equipment and went down the stairs. The sound of her boots on the metal was the last ordinary sound for a long time. The gunfire from the ridge intensified. The enemy had found their rhythm, the mechanical confidence of a crew that has practiced this sequence many times in preparation, and the rounds were coming with the regularity of something that has been planned down to the interval. The communication building took a hit. Part of the east wall took another. Somewhere on the south side of the base, a vehicle was on fire. And Maya was lying still on the south roof, eye to the scope, finding the exact center of the position on the ridge that was generating all of it. I have the gun position, she said. Confirmed, Wallace said. Confirmed. Muzzle flash 1100 meters bearing 044.7. I have a clear sight line. Crew size at least 3, possibly 4. Gunloader spotter, and I think there's a commander position 10 meters left of the gun. Wallace was on his radio. Reeves, give me a status. Reeves's voice came back distorted by the noise of the firefight below. East wall is gone, Sergeant. We have 2 men down, both stable but out of the fight. The defensive line is holding, but the machine gun from the ridge is suppressing OP1 and OP2. Neither position can return effective fire at that angle. We need that gun off the ridge or we lose the east side entirely. Copy, Wallace said. He lowered the radio, looked at Maya. You have authorization. Engage at will. Maya said nothing. She was already doing the calculation. She did it the way she had been trained to do it, in the way she had done it so many times that it was no longer a process she was conscious of performing. It was something her body did the way a pianist's hands find chords without looking at the keys. Distance 1100 meters. Wind from the southwest at approximately 12 to 14 kilometers per hour, gusting intermittently, which meant she needed to time the shot for the lull between gusts. Elevation change from her position to the target was negative 32 meters, which affected the bullet drop calculation by a factor she had already pre-computed when she set up this position. The target was moving. Not dramatically, the gun crew was not running. They were working and working. People have a rhythm that is almost as predictable as stillness if you watch it long enough. She watched it. She found the rhythm. She understood where the gun commander's head would be in the next 3 seconds relative to where it was now, and she aimed not where he was, but where he was going to be. The wind dropped. In the half second between one gust and the next, when the air was completely still, Maya Carter fired. The first round covered 1,100 meters in just over 1 second. The enemy machine gun stopped firing. Not slowed, not stuttered, stopped, full stop. The sudden silence from the ridge was so total that soldiers on the east wall actually looked up from their cover positions because the absence of the thing that had been trying to kill them was more disorienting than its presence had been. Hit, Wallace said. He had his binoculars up. Maya was already cycling the bolt, already finding the second target, the loader who had broken from the gun position and was moving toward a secondary position 10 meters to the right, which was exactly what a trained loader does when the primary position takes a hit. She tracked him for 2 seconds, found the point where his movement would intersect with her sightline, and fired. The second round, the loader went down. She was already moving to the third target, the commander position 10 meters left of the gun. In the scope, she could see movement there, someone standing, someone who had been directing the operation and was now recalibrating in real time, someone who was about to give an order that would reorganize the remaining crew and restart the attack. She found him. She watched him for 1 full second. She fired. The third round, and the ridge went quiet. Not just the gun, the whole ridge. The coordinating voice that had been running the attack was gone, and without coordination, the remaining fighters on the ridge made the decision that fighters always make. When the command structure collapses, they went still, and they waited for someone to tell them what to do next. And in that stillness, The tactical momentum of the entire attack transferred from the ridge to the people inside Redstone Outpost. 3 shots, 1,100 meters, darkness wind, angle movement, every variable that makes a long-range shot impossible, and she had solved every one of them in sequence in real time under fire while lying on a concrete roof with her base burning around her. Wallace lowered his binoculars. He stood on the roof with the radio in his hand and the sounds of the firefight below him still going the echo, and the small arms and the voices of his soldiers working through their training with the desperation of people who are fighting for their lives. And he looked at the back of Maya Carter's head, at the still shape of her behind the rifle, and he said nothing for 5 full seconds. Then he keyed his radio. All positions, this is Wallace. The ridge gun is down. I repeat, the ridge gun is down. East wall, hold your position. OP1 and OP2. You are clear to engage any remaining targets in your sector. Reeves pushed the reserve team to the east gap. We seal it right now. Reeves's response came back immediately. Copy, Sergeant. Moving. The next 18 minutes were the kind of controlled chaos that military training exists to manage. The enemy ground team that had been waiting for the ridge gun to suppress the base found themselves without their primary fire support at the exact moment they were supposed to push forward, and the soldiers of Redstone Outpost, led by Reeves with the focused intensity of a man who has been waiting to do something useful for 45 minutes, sealed the east gap and pushed the ground team back before they could reorganize. It was not clean. It was not textbook. 3 more soldiers took minor wounds. The south building was going to need significant repair. The east perimeter wall was gone entirely and would have to be rebuilt from nothing. But the base held. At 1944, 33 minutes after the first explosion, Reeves radioed up to the south roof. Sergeant, ground contact has broken off. No confirmed pursuit. Ridge position is silent. We have the perimeter. Wallace exhaled. It was the first full exhale he had taken in 33 minutes, and he felt it move through him from his chest to the tips of his fingers, all the held tension releasing at once into the open air. He pressed back against the parapet wall and slid down until he was sitting on the concrete, and he held his radio in both hands and stared at nothing. Maya lowered her rifle. She did it slowly, carefully, the way you put down something that has been doing important work and deserves to be set down with respect. She laid it beside her on the roof and rolled onto her back and looked up at the sky, which was fully dark now, thick with stars in the way desert skies get when there is no competing light, and she breathed. In, out, in, out. The weight she had been carrying for 36 hours was still there. It did not go anywhere immediately. It never did. But it had changed shape. It was no longer the weight of something approaching. It was the weight of something that had arrived and been met, and that was a different kind of heavy. Wallace said, "Are you hit?" "No," Maya said. "You're sure?" "I'm sure." He looked at her. In the dark, she looked like someone who had been carved out of the same material as the roof part of the structure, essential and impossible to remove without changing the whole shape of the thing. 3 shots, he said. 3 shots, she confirmed. 1,100 meters in the dark, under fire. The wind helped on the second one, she said. It was such a precise and modest thing to say that Wallace almost laughed, except that nothing about the last 33 minutes was funny enough for laughter. "You saved this base," he said. Maya was quiet for a moment. She was still looking at the sky. "The base saved itself. Your people held the ground contact. Reeves sealed the east gap. Olivia kept communications running." She paused. "I just handled the ridge." "The ridge was going to kill us," Wallace said. "Yes," Maya said. "It was." Neither of them said anything for a while. Below, the sounds of the outpost were changing, the sharp, urgent sounds of active contact giving way to the lower, more sustained sounds of aftermath. People checking on each other. Medics working. Someone calling for a status report in a voice that was tired but alive. Cole's voice came from the roof access door before the rest of him appeared. He came up slowly, like he was not sure what he was going to find up there. And when he came through the door, he stood and looked at Maya lying on the roof and Wallace sitting against the parapet, and he said nothing for a moment. Then he said, "We're good. Perimeter is sealed. 2 serious injuries, both stable. No KIA." "No KIA," Wallace repeated, like he was confirming something he needed to hear twice. "No key," Cole said again. He looked at Maya. 3 shots. Torres timed it. 4.8 seconds from first to third. Maya said nothing. 4.8 seconds. Cole said again, quiet or not to the room but to himself. The way you repeat something you are trying to fully understand. He walked over and sat down on the concrete near her feet, not close, not intrusive, just nearby like he needed to be in the radius of something he could not name. I heard the gun go quiet, he said. We were taking fire and then it just stopped. And for a second, nobody knew what that meant. And then Reeves started moving and everyone understood. Maya turned her head and looked at him. Is Reeves okay? Cole blinked. Of all the things he had expected her to say, that was not one of them. Yeah, Reeves is good. He took a fragment on the forearm, nothing serious. He's already calling it a scratch. Tell him it's not a scratch, Maya said. Make sure he sees the medic. Cole stared at her. Then he said, okay. He pulled out his radio and told Reeves to see the medic. And the fact that Reeves, who had called it a scratch and would have walked around with it all night without treating it, actually said copy and walked to the medical station. That fact, small as it was, said something about the kind of authority that does not come from rank or volume, but from something that is harder to define and impossible to manufacture. At 20:15, Olivia came back up to the roof. She was carrying 4 bottles of water and she distributed them without saying anything and then sat down next to Maya close enough that their shoulders were almost touching. Maya pushed herself up from her back to a sitting position and drank half the bottle in one long pull. Command wants a full report, Olivia said. They're asking about the ridge position. They want to know how it was neutralized. Tell them a sniper engaged from the south roof at approximately 1930, Maya said. They're going to want more than that. Tell them 3 shots at 1,100 meters neutralized the crew-served weapon position, the secondary loader position, and the command element. Maya paused. And tell them the gap in the northeast quadrant coverage has been closed. Olivia relayed the information. The radio on the other end was quiet for a moment. Then a voice, not a field voice, but a command voice, the kind that lives behind a desk and speaks in measured tones because it is never close enough to the fire to feel urgency, said, confirm identity of the engaging sniper. Olivia looked at Maya. Petty Officer 2nd Class Maya Carter, Maya said. Navy SEAL, attached to Redstone Outpost 38 hours ago. Olivia relayed it. Another pause. Longer this time. Then the command voice said something that Olivia would remember for the rest of her life. It said, copy that, tell her good shooting. Olivia lowered the radio. She looked at Maya. Good shooting, she said. Maya drank the rest of her water. Wallace pushed himself off the concrete and stood up. He stretched his back, which cracked audibly in the night air. And he looked at the sky the same way Maya had looked at it a few minutes ago, with the relieved exhaustion of someone who has been carrying something for a very long time and has just been told they can set it down for a moment. I'm going to check my people, he said. Yes, Sergeant, Maya said. He started toward the door. Then he stopped. He stood with his back to her and his hand on the doorframe, and he said without turning around, I should have listened to you yesterday. The roof was quiet. I know why you didn't, Maya said. That doesn't make it right. No, she agreed, but it makes it human. He stood there for another second. Then he walked down the stairs. Cole was still sitting near Maya's feet. He had his arms around his knees and he was looking out at the dark in the direction of the northeast ridge, which was invisible now, just a shape against a slightly lighter sky. I need to ask you something, he said. Ask. When you were on the scope just now, when you were taking those shots, he paused, trying to find the right words for something that he had been turning over in his mind for the past 30 minutes. Were you scared? Maya thought about it. She thought about the moment before the first shot, the complete consuming stillness that exists in the space between a decision and its execution, where everything that is not relevant has been stripped away and the only things left are distance and wind and the weight of what depends on you getting it right. She thought about whether fear was the right word for what she had felt in that moment. I was precise, she said finally. Fear and precision can't exist in the same space. So I chose precision. Cole looked at her. And the fear later, she said. I put it in later. Remember. He did remember. He had heard her say it that afternoon, and he had thought he understood it. Now he understood it differently, not as a technique, but as a discipline, one that cost something real to maintain, one that would come due eventually in a quiet moment when there was nothing left to focus on. I put a lot of things in later, Cole said quietly. Most of us do, Maya said. That's what later is for. At 2050, Reeves came up to the roof. His left forearm was bandaged. The medic had done exactly what Maya had anticipated, which was determine that the fragment wound was deeper than it looked and required proper treatment. Reeves had the expression of a man who has been told he was right about something he did not enjoy being right about. He sat down with his back against the parapet and looked at Maya with the direct, unornamented assessment of someone who evaluates people for a living. "I'm going to tell you something," he said. "All right," Maya said. "I've been in the Army for 17 years. I've served with a lot of people. Some of them were good. Some of them were very good. A few of them were," he stopped looking for the word, "exceptional, the kind of person you remember for the rest of your career because they showed you something you did not think was possible." Maya said nothing. "You're going in that last category," Reeves said, "for what it's worth." Maya looked at him. "It's worth something," she said. Reeves nodded. He pushed himself back up. "Get some sleep if you can. Wallace is going to want a full debrief at 0600 and Command is going to want to talk to you before that. It's going to be a long night." "I know," Maya said. He left. Cole left shortly after something having settled in him that had been unsettled since the landing zone, something that had taken the events of the last hour and a half to fully resolve. He paused at the door and said her name once quietly, and when she looked at him, he did not have a follow-up, just that acknowledgement, just the recognition of someone seeing another person clearly for the first time. Then he was gone. Olivia stayed. She always stayed. At 21:55, with the outpost settling into the careful, watchful quiet of a place that has survived something and is not yet sure it is completely over, Olivia sat next to Maya on the roof, and they looked at the stars the way they had looked at the dark before, without words, without the need for them. "You knew exactly what was going to happen," Olivia said. "Every step of it." "Not every step," Maya said. "I knew the shape of it. The sequence." "Yes. And the shots. Did you know before you took them? Did you know they would connect?" Maya considered this honestly. She considered the difference between confidence and certainty, between preparation and inevitability, between all the training and all the hours and all the calculations, and the fraction of a second when a finger closes on a trigger and everything becomes irrevocable. "I knew I had done everything that could be done to make them connect," she said. The rest was, she paused. The rest was asking the world to cooperate. "And it did," Olivia said. "This time," Maya said. "This time it did." Below them, someone had started a generator, and a string of lights came on along the west wall, ember and steady, the kind of light that says, "We are still here." One of the soldiers on the perimeter saw it and said something to the person next to him, and that person said something back, and then the second person laughed. Not the performance laugh from the landing zone, not the crowd laugh that requires an audience, but the small private laugh of two people who have just been through something together and are discovering on the other side of it that they are still capable of laughter. Maya heard it, and for the first time in 36 hours, something in her expression shifted, something underneath the control, underneath the precision, underneath the discipline, something small and real and entirely her own. Not a smile exactly, but close. She reached for her rifle. She checked the chamber with the practiced habit of someone who never goes to sleep without knowing exactly what condition her weapon is in. And she set it down beside her, and she leaned her back against the parapet wall, and she looked at the sky. 1,100 meters away, the northeast ridge was dark and still, and Redstone Outpost was alive. Nobody slept much that night. The soldiers of Redstone Outpost moved through the hours after the attack in the way people move through the hours after something that almost happened, carefully, quietly checking on each other, with the slightly too frequent casualness of people who are verifying that the people around them are still real and still present. The medic made 3 separate rounds through the barracks. Reeves walked the perimeter twice without being asked. Torres sat at OP2 until 4 in the morning, even though his rotation had ended at midnight, because sitting somewhere with a purpose felt better than lying in a bunk with nothing to do but replay the last 2 hours. Maya did not sleep at all. She stayed on the south roof until day or 2:30, when the cold had settled into the concrete deep enough that even she could feel it working into her joints. And then she climbed down and found a corner of the command building where she could sit with her back against the wall and her rifle across her knees and her eyes open. Not watching anything specific, just open. The state she entered after a high-stakes operation was not rest exactly. It was a kind of suspended alertness, like a system running in low-power mode, present enough to respond if something required a response, quiet enough to let the night pass. Olivia found her there at 0300 and did not say anything. She just sat down on the floor nearby and closed her eyes, and within 4 minutes she was asleep, with her head tilted back against the wall, and Maya listened to her breathe and let the sound of it be what it was, evidence that someone was alive who might not have been. At 04:05, Wallace walked into the command building and found them both there. He stopped when he saw them. He looked at Maya awake still, rifle across her knees, and then at Olivia asleep beside her, and he had the expression of a man who has just understood something he should have understood earlier and is not entirely comfortable with how long it took him. He sat down in the chair at the command desk and did not wake either of them. He just sat there in the dark and looked at the wall and did whatever it is that commanders do when the immediate crisis is over and the longer accounting has not yet begun. At 0530, 30 minutes before the debrief, Cole appeared. He had clearly not slept. He had the specific look of sleeplessness that comes not from an inability to rest, but from a mind that would not stop moving, slightly glassy around the eyes, jaw tight. The look of someone who has been having a long argument with themselves and has not yet reached a conclusion. He stopped in the doorway when he saw Maya. He looked at her the way he had looked at the northeast ridge from the south roof the night before, trying to see something clearly after a long time of looking at it wrong. Debrief in 30, he said. I know, Maya said. He came in and sat down on a crate near the door. He had a mug of coffee that he held in both hands without drinking. He looked at Olivia still asleep, and something crossed his face that was too private to name. She stayed with you all night, he asked. Most of it. Cole nodded slowly. He turned the mug in his hands. I've been thinking, he said. About what I said at the landing zone. He stopped. Started again. About what I did at the landing zone, your rifle case. He stopped again. The words were not coming easily, which meant they were coming honestly. I've been trying to figure out why. Not to excuse it, just to understand it, because I need to understand it. Maya watched him. She did not fill the silence. I think, Cole said slowly, that I was scared. Not of you, not specifically, but of the idea of needing someone I had already decided I didn't need to take seriously. Because if you were real, if you were actually what command said you were, then that meant I had spent 5 months feeling safe in a place that wasn't as safe as I thought. And I didn't want that to be true. The command building was quiet. Outside the base was starting to wake up, boot steps on dirt, the clink of metal, a voice calling a morning check in the distance. That's a hard thing to admit, Maya said. It's a harder thing to live with, Cole said. Knowing that I almost that because of me, because of the way I set the tone on that landing zone, Wallace almost didn't listen to you. And if he hadn't listened, but he did, Maya said, barely. Barely counts, Maya said. In this business, barely is sometimes all you get. Cole looked at her. How are you not angry? Who says I'm not? He blinked. He had not expected that. I was angry, Maya said, from the moment you kicked my rifle case into the dirt. I was angry through the entire first day. When Wallace dismissed me in the command building, when I walked out and you were standing there, smiling. She paused. I put the anger in the same place I put the fear, in later, because anger takes the same space as precision, and I needed precision more than I needed to be angry at you. Cole absorbed that. He drank his coffee for the first time. He was quiet for a long moment, and when he spoke again, his voice was lower and more careful. What happens to it? The anger, when later comes. Maya looked at him with the directness of someone who has thought about this question many times in many quiet places. It changes, she said, into something that's less about the person who caused it and more about what you do with it. Whether you use it to be better at your job, whether you use it to understand something you didn't understand before. She paused. Or whether you just carry it. Which do you do? Depends on the situation, she said. This time I think I'll use it. Cole nodded. It was the nod of someone receiving something that they know they will spend a long time unpacking. He stood up and finished his coffee and set the mug on the desk. For what it's worth, he said, what you did last night, what you've done since you got here, I'm going to be talking about it for the rest of my career. Don't talk about it, Maya said. Learn from it. He looked at her one more time. Then he walked out to help set up the debrief. Olivia woke up at 0545, blinking and disoriented in the way of someone who has fallen asleep in an unusual place and needs a moment to remember why. She looked around, found Maya in the same position she had been in 3 hours ago and said, "You didn't sleep." "No, you should sleep." After the debrief, Olivia rubbed her face and pulled herself to her feet and picked up her radio equipment from the floor. She checked each component with the automatic thoroughness of someone whose job depends on everything working exactly right. And when she was satisfied, she slung it over her shoulder and looked at Maya. "They're going to talk about last night for a long time," she said. "In this unit, at command, probably beyond that." "Maybe," Maya said. "Not maybe," Olivia said. 3 shots, 1,100 meters, 4.8 seconds. That doesn't just happen. People are going to ask how." "Training," Maya said. "And a lot of very cold nights on a lot of very uncomfortable surfaces," Maya said. "Watching things nobody else thought were worth watching." Olivia smiled. It was a small smile, the kind that contains more than it shows. "Come on," she said. "Debrief." The debrief was held in the main room of the command building at 0600 exactly. Wallace ran it the way he ran everything, organized, sequential, no excess. He went through the timeline of the attack from the first explosion to the point when Reeves confirmed the ground contact had broken off. He asked for status reports from each section. He noted the casualties, 2 serious injuries from the initial perimeter strike, 3 minor wounds during the ground contact phase, all personnel accounted for, no KIA, and he wrote each one down by hand in his command log. Then he got to the ridge. He described what had happened factually and without embellishment. The crew-served weapon position, the suppression of OP-1 and OP-2, the inability of existing defensive positions to engage the ridge target at that angle. And then the engagement from the south roof that had neutralized the gun position, the secondary loader and the enemy command element in 3 sequential shots over 4.8 seconds. He said Maya's name and rank clearly and without qualification. And then he said something that nobody in the room had been expecting. "I want to be direct about something," Wallace said. He was not looking at his notes. He was looking at the room. Petty Officer Carter identified the threat on the northeast ridge 36 hours before the attack. She presented her analysis to me twice. She requested specific defensive adjustments that would have improved our response posture. I implemented some of those adjustments. I did not implement all of them, and the ones I delayed cost us time and created unnecessary risk. He paused. "That is my error, not hers, mine." The room was completely still. Reeves, who had heard Wallace debrief dozens of times, looked at the table. Cole, who was sitting 3 seats away from Maya, looked at Wallace. Torres, who was technically too junior to be in this debrief, but had been included because of his role at OP-2, looked at his hands. Maya looked at Wallace and said nothing. "The right call," Wallace continued, "was to move to full alert status at 1900 hours last night when Petty Officer Carter reported the bleed frequency transmission. We were 47 seconds from the first explosion when that report came in. 47 seconds in a full defensive posture would have meant our people on the east wall were in hardened positions instead of exposed positions when the IED hit." He picked up his pen, set it down. "We got lucky. We got lucky because one person was watching the right thing at the right time and was good enough to do what she did when it mattered. But luck is not a defensive strategy, and the way this night went is not the way it should have gone." He looked at Maya directly. "Petty Officer Carter, on behalf of this command, I owe you an apology, and I want to say it in front of every person in this room because every person in this room was here when we made you feel like you needed to prove yourself to be heard. You shouldn't have had to prove anything. You should have been heard because of what you brought to this outpost. I'm sorry we made it harder than it needed to be." The silence that followed was the loudest thing Maya had heard since the ridge gun stopped firing. She looked at Wallace for a long moment. She thought about 36 hours of watching and calculating and being dismissed and having her rifle case kicked into the dirt and standing outside a command building while a man decided she was not worth the adjustment to his certainty. She thought about all the things she had put in later, and she thought about what later was actually for, not for anger, not for settling scores, but for understanding. "Thank you, Sergeant," she said. "I accept that. Not I told you so, not I knew it. Not the satisfaction of a person who has been proven right about something they paid a high price to be right about. Just I accept that." Cole exhaled. Reeves looked up from the table. The debrief continued. Wallace went through the post-attack requirements methodically, the repair of the east perimeter, the documentation of the engagement for command review, the casualty reports, the equipment assessments, the changes to the watch rotation for the remaining 3 days before evacuation. He was thorough and practical, and when he spoke about the Northeast Quadrant coverage, he said without any additional commentary that Petty Officer Carter would be assigned as the primary observer for the Northeast Quadrant for the duration of the outpost operation. He did not ask if that was acceptable. He stated it as a fact, and everyone in the room understood the difference. After the debrief, the base moved into the work of recovery. There was a lot of it. The east perimeter was the most urgent. With the wall compromised, the outpost had an exposed approach corridor that needed to be sealed or at minimum covered with additional observation until physical repair could be completed. Reeves organized the work teams with the efficient authority of someone who has managed the aftermath of bad nights before and knows exactly in what order things need to happen. Cole was on a work crew for the east perimeter. He had asked to be specifically. He worked alongside 3 other soldiers through the morning heat-moving debris and setting up temporary barriers, and he did it without complaint and without commentary, which was not entirely characteristic, in which the other soldiers on the crew noticed without saying anything about it. 809 Hud Mendez, the soldier who had made the comment about taking orders from a girl when Cole was moving the ammunition, walked past the worksite on his way to a different assignment. He slowed when he passed Cole. He looked at the work. He looked at Cole. He seemed to be calculating something. "Hey," Mendez said. Cole looked up. "What?" "Last night, the Ridge gun going quiet." Mendez paused. He was working through something in real time, visibly without quite enough sophistication to hide the process. "That was her, the SEAL." "Yes," Cole said. 3 shots. 3 shots. Mendez was quiet. He looked in the direction of the south roof, though Maya was not up there at this hour. "I said something yesterday, when we were moving the ammo, about, I remember what you said," Cole told him. "Yeah." Mendez shifted his weight. He was not a person built for apologies. You could see it in his posture, the way the words were costing him something he was not accustomed to spending. "That was, I shouldn't have said that." "No," Cole said, "you shouldn't have. I'm going to tell her that." Cole looked at him. He assessed the statement not for sincerity, because sincerity was there, but for substance, for whether the thing being said was the beginning of an understanding or just the performance of one. He saw something in Mendez that he recognized because it was the same thing he had seen in himself at 0530 this morning, sitting on a crate with a mug of coffee he was not drinking. "Good," Cole said. "Do that." Mendez walked on. At 1:30, something happened that nobody had anticipated. Command called. Not the standard secure channel morning check-in, a specific call flagged as high priority directed to Redstone Outpost Command with a request to speak with the commanding officer and the sniper who had engaged the Northeast Ridge position the previous night. Wallace took the call in the command building. He asked Maya to be present. Reeves stood in the doorway because he did not want to be in the room, if he did not have to be, but also did not want to be too far from whatever was about to happen. The voice on the line was not the measured desk voice that Olivia had relayed the night before. This was someone higher, several grades higher, the kind of voice that does not need volume to carry authority, because the authority is structural, built into the frequency of the transmission itself. The voice said that Command had reviewed the engagement report filed by Redstone Outpost at 21:30 the previous evening. The voice said that Command had also reviewed the observation logs and the pre-attack analysis that Wallace had included in the report. The analysis that Maya had given him, the notes from her black notebook, the timeline of the pattern, break in the observation data. Then the voice said something that changed the temperature of the room. "We are looking at a second outpost," the voice said, 80 kilometers northeast of your position. Similar profile to Redstone, late deployment, small garrison evacuation in 6 days. We have received reports of an 11-day pattern break in enemy activity in their operational sector. Wallace's jaw went tight. Maya went very still. "We are considering whether to recommend a specialist deployment to that outpost," the voice continued. "Based on what happened at Redstone last night, Command believes that recommendations should include Petty Officer Carter." Silence. "Petty Officer Carter," the voice said directly, "you identified a threat that experienced on-site personnel had not identified in 5 months of operation. You neutralized a crew-served weapon position at 1,100 meters under night conditions in active fire. And you did all of this in 38 hours. A pause. Command wants to know if you are willing to extend your current deployment and transfer to the second outpost. Maya did not answer immediately. She stood in the command building with the weight of the question settling over her, and she thought about the things that were easy to think about first. The fact that she had not slept in 22 hours. The fact that her body had a specific vocabulary of aches from a night on a concrete roof. The fact that somewhere in the distance, there was a concept called going home that she had been keeping in the peripheral vision of her mind for the past 6 weeks. Then she thought about the second outpost. About 30 people who were close enough to evacuation that home had started to feel real. About an 11-day silence in their sector that they might be interpreting as nothing. About a northeast ridge or whatever the equivalent was at their position that nobody had looked at from the right angle yet. Tell me about their observation logs, she said. A pause on the command end, then with something in the voice that was not quite surprise but was adjacent to it. We can have the logs to you within the hour. Send them, Maya said. I'll give you my answer when I've read them. Wallace looked at her. She looked at him. Something passed between them, not words, not even quite a look, but the kind of understanding that develops between people who have been through something together and have come out the other side with a different map of each other than the one they started with. She'll call you back, Wallace said into the radio. Give her the hour. The call ended. Reeves came all the way into the room. He stood with his arms crossed and looked at Maya with the evaluating expression he had used on the roof the night before. You're going to go, he said. It was not a question. Probably, Maya said, but I want to read the logs first. Why, Wallace asked. You already know what you're going to find. Maybe, Maya said, but I want to know what I'm walking into. I want to know if it's the same pattern or a variation. I want to know the terrain profile and the garrison size and the distance from their perimeter to the nearest ridgeline with a viable fire position. She paused. I want to go in prepared. Unlike here, Wallace said, and he said it without defensiveness, just the flat acknowledgement of a man taking his own inventory. Unlike here, Maya confirmed, and she said it without cruelty, just the flat acknowledgement of someone who has already processed that chapter and moved on to the next one. The logs came through 40 minutes later. Maya sat at the command desk and read them with the same concentrated attention she had given to Redstone's logs on her first afternoon. Wallace sat across the room and pretended to work on evacuation documentation. Reeves went back to the perimeter. Cole came in at some point, saw that Maya was in the middle of something, and left a cup of coffee on the edge of the desk without interrupting her. She read for 35 minutes. When she finished, she closed the last page and sat for a moment with her hands flat on the desk and her eyes looking at something that was not in the room. Well, Wallace said, it's the same pattern, Maya said. It's almost identical. The timing is offset by about 72 hours, which means if the two operations are coordinated, and I think they are, the second outpost is looking at contact in approximately 3 days. Before their evacuation, 2 days before their evacuation. Wallace leaned back in his chair. He looked at the ceiling. And you can get there in time. If I leave today, Maya said. He looked at her. Then you need to leave today. She picked up the radio and called command back and said yes. The preparation for her departure took less than 2 hours, which was all the time there was. She had arrived with a rifle case and a small pack, and she was leaving with a rifle case and a small pack because people who live the way Maya Carter lived have learned to travel light, not because they are passing through, but because being unburdened is itself a form of readiness. Word spread through the base, the way word always spread, quickly and incompletely, with enough accuracy to generate feeling and enough gap to generate questions. People knew she was leaving. People knew it was because of another outpost. People knew she had said yes to something that she could have said no to after 22 hours without sleep, and a night that would have given most people reason enough to say no. At 1-300 with a helicopter 45 minutes out, Maya was on the south roof doing one final check of the northeast ridge. Not because she thought there was remaining threat. She was satisfied that the position had been fully neutralized, but because it was the kind of thoroughness that is not optional for people who do what she does. You check because you always check. You check because the one time you do not check is the time you should have. Cole found her up there. He came up without announcement and stood at the parapet looking at the ridge, which in the full afternoon light looked like any other ridge, empty, still, and different. The geography of violence always looks ordinary in daylight after. 40 minutes, he said. About that, Maya said. He leaned on the parapet with his forearms and looked out and did not say anything for a while. Then he said, I looked up your record. Maya lowered the scope. What? Your service record. Wallace gave me access to the relevant portions this morning. After the debrief, Cole paused. 8 deployments, 3 commendations for valor, 2 previous instances of identifying and neutralizing hostile positions that protecting positions had missed. He looked at her. You've done this before. Multiple times. Gone into a place where people didn't believe you. Proved yourself, and then moved to the next one. Maya said nothing. How many times? Cole asked. She picked up her scope again. Looked at the ridge one more time. Enough times to have gotten good at the part that comes before anyone believes me, she said. Does it ever? Cole stopped. Tried again. Does it ever get easier, the part where you have to wait for people to see it? No, Maya said simply. It doesn't. But you keep doing it. Someone has to watch the ridge, she said. Not everyone knows how, so the people who know how keep watching it. Cole stood beside her for another minute. Then he said, I'm going to be different. After this, I'm not going to be the person on the landing zone. Not ever again. Maya looked at him for a long moment. She looked at him with the full attention she gave, things she wanted to assess accurately, not quickly, not partially, but completely. I know, she said, and she meant it. At 13:30, the whole base knew it was time. There was no formal gathering. Nobody announced one. Nobody organized it. But when Maya came down from the south roof with her rifle case and her pack, people were there. Not in formation, not in any organized way. Just there, scattered across the path between the south building and the landing zone, in the natural, unplanned arrangement of people who want to be present for something without quite knowing how to say so. Torres was there. He straightened when he saw her and gave her a nod that was trying to be military and wound up being something more personal. The 2 soldiers from the east wall who had been in hardened positions when the perimeter blew, both of them moving carefully, still working through the aftermath in their bodies, were there. Mendez was there. He had found Maya at 1100 and said what he said he was going to say, and she had listened and said thank you and moved on. And the simplicity of that transaction had clearly affected him in a way the anticipated difficulty of it had not. Reeves was at the edge of the landing zone with his bandaged arm and his evaluating expression, and when Maya reached him, he extended his good hand, and she shook it, and he said, watch your 6. And she said, always one. And that was all that needed to be said between 2 people who speak the same professional language. Olivia was the one who came out ahead of everyone else. She walked up to Maya with no military formality at all, just herself, 22 years old, carrying her radio equipment in one arm, and nothing rehearsed in her expression. I don't want you to go, she said. I know, Maya said, but I know why you are. Yes. Olivia looked at her with the direct, unguarded attention of someone who has not yet learned to cover the things she feels with the things she thinks she should feel. Do you ever get lonely going from one place to another, being the person nobody believed over and over? Maya set her rifle case down for a moment. She thought about the question the way she thought about all honest questions, fully without deflecting. She thought about the pattern of her career, the sequence of places she had been and people she had stood among, and things she had seen coming that other people had not seen until it was almost too late. She thought about the specific loneliness of being right before anyone is ready to believe you. And she thought about what counterbalanced it. Sometimes, she said, but then I think about the people in the next place. The 30 people in some outpost right now who are 3 days from something they don't know is coming. And I stopped thinking about lonely. Olivia's jaw tightened. She reached out and hugged Maya quickly without warning, the way 22-year-olds hug people when they are feeling something they do not have the vocabulary for yet. Maya returned it, one arm, brief, genuine. Take care of this outpost, Maya said. We will, Olivia said. Wallace was the last one. He was standing at the edge of the landing zone with his arms at his sides and no particular expression on his face, which was itself an expression, the face of a man who has said what he needed to say in a room full of people and is now saying the rest of it in a place where it is just the 2 of them. Maya stopped in front of him. Your northeast quadrant is covered on, she said. I've briefed Reeves on the observation rotation. Torres knows the ridge signs to watch for. Your perimeter is solid. I know, Wallace said. The evacuation in 3 days should be clean. I know that too. They looked at each other. 11 years of command on one side, 8 deployments and 3 commendations, and a black notebook full of things nobody else thought to write down on the other side. I keep thinking about the 47 seconds, Wallace said. Don't, Maya said. Think about the next 36 hours instead. Because somewhere northeast of here, someone is about to walk off a helicopter and they're going to see something that nobody else has seen yet, and they're going to need someone to believe them before it's too late. Wallace absorbed that, and you're going to make sure they're heard. That's the job, Maya said. He looked at her one more time. The helicopter was audible now. The familiar thump of rotors coming in over the ridge in the landing zone was about to become exactly what landing zones become, functional focused, no room for anything that is not the next thing. You were the best soldier I've ever been wrong about, Wallace said. It was the most honest thing he had said to her. Maybe the most honest thing he had said to anyone in a long time. Maya picked up her rifle case. Be a right faster next time, she said, and she walked toward the sound of the helicopter. The helicopter banked northeast, and the ground below shifted, and Redstone Outpost became a small square arrangement of structures that got smaller and then disappeared behind a ridge, and Maya Carter did not watch it go. She was already reading. She had the observation logs from the second outpost open on her lap. Printed pages that command had transmitted ahead of her departure, slightly smudged from the field printer, edges already curling in the dry air that moved through the helicopter cabin. She read with the same concentrated attention she had given to Redstone's logs on her first afternoon there. The mechanical pencil moving occasionally marking something, circling a date, drawing a line between 2 entries that were separated by 3 weeks, but connected by a pattern that only became visible when you read the whole thing instead of the pieces. The crew chief leaned over after 20 minutes and shouted something over the rotor noise. Maya held up one finger without looking up. He leaned back. She kept reading. By the time the helicopter started its descent, she had read the logs twice and filled 4 pages of her black notebook and had a very clear picture of what she was flying into. It was the same pattern, exactly the same. The 11-day silence, the behavioral shift, the specific way the enemy activity had not disappeared but had concluded, had reached the end of its preparation phase and gone still, in the way that things go still, when they are ready and waiting for the signal. But there was one difference. At Redstone, the preparation had taken 11 days, and the attack had come on the 12th. The log she was reading now showed a 14-day silence, which meant the attack at the second outpost was not 3 days away. It was tonight. She was reaching for the radio when the helicopter touched down. The second outpost was called Iron Gate. It was smaller than Redstone, 26 soldiers instead of 30, a tighter perimeter, a different configuration of buildings. The mountains around it were closer, the ridge lines were steeper, the angles of attack from the surrounding high ground were more numerous and more severe. And the officer who met her on the landing zone was a captain named Aaron Marsh, who was 40 years old, broad-shouldered, with the calm and slightly compressed demeanor of someone managing a great deal of information simultaneously. He had a reputation. She had asked command about him on the radio during the flight for being methodical, precise, and extremely reluctant to change plans midstream. He was, in other words, a version of Wallace. But he came to the landing zone himself, which Wallace had not done, and he extended his hand before she reached him, rather than waiting for her to close the distance. And he said, Petty Officer Carter, I read the Redstone report this morning. Walk with me. No landing zone performance, no crowd, no kicked rifle case. Maya walked with him. I know why you're here, Marsh said. He was moving at a pace that suggested the conversation had a destination, and he wanted to reach it efficiently. Command briefed me an hour ago. 11-day pattern break, possible pre-attack positioning, potential ridge threat on the northeast approach. He glanced at her. Same profile as Redstone. 14 days, Maya said. Marsh stopped walking. What? Your silence is 14 days, not 11. I read your logs on the flight. She held up her notebook. The pattern break started on the 14th, not the 17th. 2 of your watch entries in the first week misattributed vehicle movement as wind noise. It wasn't wind noise. Marsh looked at the notebook. He looked at her. He was doing the calculation, the same calculation Wallace had done, the same calculation every commander does. When someone arrives with information that requires revising a picture they have already assembled, but he did it faster. 14 days, he said. That puts the attack window at... Tonight, Maya said. or early tomorrow at the latest. If the two operations are coordinated, and I believe they are tonight, is the more likely timing. Marsh was quiet for exactly 4 seconds. Then he said, "Show me what you're seeing in the logs." They went to the command building. Marsh sat across from her, and she walked him through it page by page, entry by entry. The same patient methodology she had used with Wallace, except that Marsh did not require the same amount of time to follow the argument. He asked precise questions. He pushed back twice on specific interpretations, and both times she answered him directly and with supporting data, and both times he nodded and moved forward. At no point did he question whether she was capable of the analysis. At no point did his expression suggest that the problem was the person presenting the information rather than the information itself. It took 22 minutes. When she finished, Marsh closed the log and put both hands flat on the table and looked at the wall for a moment with the focused stillness of someone making a decision that has a lot of weight on both sides of it. "The northeast ridge," he said. "Yes. We have an observation post covering the northeast quadrant." "OP3, Maya said. "I looked at your base schematic on the flight. OP3 covers the valley approach, but the angle of observation is insufficient for the upper ridge. From OP3, you can see the lower 2/3 of the ridge face. The upper third, where a crew-served weapon would be positioned for maximum range, is outside the observation arc." Marsh looked at her. "You got all of that from a base schematic." "And your OP3 logs," Maya said. "Your watch personnel are thorough. Their observation notes are detailed. They are watching everything they can see from their position." "The problem is their position." Marsh stood up. "What do you need?" The question landed differently than it had at Redstone. At Redstone, it had come after 36 hours in an argument, in a partial concession, in a near disaster. Here it came 22 minutes after she walked in the door from a man who had decided, based on a report from a base he had never visited about a person he had never met, that the thing to do with good information was use it. Maya thought about Wallace saying, "Be right faster next time." Someone had been. "I need your highest observation point with a clear sight line to the upper northeast ridge," Maya said. "I need your communications officer on a dedicated frequency with me from now until this is resolved. I need your ammunition moved out of the east building." "Already done," Marsh said. Maya stopped. "What?" "I moved the ammunition 2 hours ago. When command briefed me on the Redstone engagement, the first thing I did was look at our own vulnerable positions. The east building was the obvious one." He paused. "What else?" She looked at him for a moment, just a moment, the brief recalibration of someone whose prepared arguments have outrun the conversation. Then she said, "Double your watch rotation, position your 2 best shooters on the west wall with a northwest bearing, and get me authorization to engage the ridge position on my own judgment if I identify an active threat and you are not immediately reachable." "You have it," Marsh said immediately. "Just like that. Petty Officer Carter." Marsh picked up his radio. "I read the Redstone report. You called the attack 36 hours out. You identified the exact targeting sequence. You neutralized a crew-served weapon at 1,100 meters in the dark under active fire. What exactly would I be waiting for?" Maya had no answer to that. Not because the answer didn't exist, but because hearing it said plainly without ceremony by a man who had processed it as simple operational logic rather than as something that required overcoming a preconception that was something she had not been prepared for. She had been prepared for another Wallace. She had been prepared to spend the hours she had fighting for credibility she had already earned. She had not been prepared to be believed immediately. And the feeling that produced in her was something she did not have a word for. Not relief. Relief implied fear, and she had put the fear in later. Not gratitude exactly. Something more structural than that. The feeling of a foundation being placed under something that had been standing without one for a long time. "Thank you," she said, and she meant more by it than the words covered. Marsh was already on his radio, already issuing orders, already converting information into action with the efficiency of a man who has decided and does not revisit the decision while execution is in progress. Maya went to find her observation position. The highest point with a clear sight line to the upper northeast ridge turned out to be the northwest corner of the second building from the command structure, a rooftop access that put her 4 meters higher than Iron Gate's existing OP3 and gave her the full arc of the ridge face that OP3's angle had been cutting off. She set up her rifle in less than 6 minutes, checked the sight line at every point along the ridge, confirmed the distance, 980 meters to the most likely gun position, slightly closer than Redstone, which meant the solution space was marginally more forgiving, and settled in. It was 15:20. If she was right about the timing, she had somewhere between 2 and 12 hours. A young corporal named Diaz brought her water and a meal at 600 without being asked. He set them down without speaking and started to leave, and then stopped. He was 23 years old and had the look of someone who has been briefed on a situation and is trying to reconcile the briefing with the person in front of him. "You're the one from Redstone," he said, "last night." "Yes," Maya said. "3 shots," Diaz said. "Yes, you know." He was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "My cousin is at Redstone. He's one of the guys on the east wall." A pause. "He texted my mom this morning. He said a sniper saved the whole base." Maya kept her eye at the scope. "Your cousin held his position on the east wall under direct fire from a crew-served weapon," she said. "That's not nothing. Tell him I said so." Diaz stood there for another second. He seemed to be deciding whether to say something else. Then he said, "We're going to be okay tonight." Maya thought about the question. She thought about what honesty required and what honesty was for. And she thought about a 23-year-old waiting for an answer that would either put his fear somewhere manageable or confirm it. "I'm going to do everything I know how to do," she said, "and I know how to do a lot." Diaz nodded. He left. She ate without taking her eye from the ridge for more than 30 seconds at a time. At 17:15, Marsh came up to the roof. He did not stay long. He had a base to manage and a watch rotation to coordinate, and 3 other things happening simultaneously that required his attention. But he stood at the parapet for 4 minutes and looked at the ridge and said, "Anything? Not yet," Maya said, "but the light is wrong right now. Give it another hour." "I'll be on the radio," he said. "I know." He left without drama. That was the thing about Marsh. He moved through situations without adding weight to them, which was a rarer quality than it sounded like. Good commanders do not add weight. They carry it somewhere else and deal with it privately and show up to the next conversation with their hands free. At 7:48, the communications officer, a specialist named Park, 24 years old, very fast on the radio, called up from the command building to report a dust signature in the Northeast Valley. She had been monitoring the approach roads on Marsh's orders since 1600. The dust signature was at the same coordinates Maya had circled in the logs on the helicopter. Maya already had it in the scope. "Convoy movement," she called down. "Multiple vehicles, same profile as Redstone. They're not approaching the base, they're moving to the ridge access road." Park relayed it to Marsh in real time. Marsh's response came back in 15 seconds. "All stations, this is Iron Gate Actual. We are now at full alert. All positions, full kit, all weapons hot. This is not a drill. Acknowledged by position." The acknowledgements came back one by one. OP1, OP2, OP3, East Wall, West Wall, South Gate, each voice carrying a different shade of the same controlled urgency. The sound of people whose training has just become the most important thing about them. At 1812, the dust signature stopped at the base of the Northeast Ridge. "Park," Maya said, "tell Captain Marsh the vehicles have stopped at the ridge access point. Personnel are dismounting. I count at least 6 individuals on foot. They are moving up the ridge." "Copy," Park said. Her voice was steady, younger than Olivia, but cut from the same cloth, the specific competence of someone who has decided that their job is too important for their hands to shake. Marsh's voice came directly to Maya's radio 30 seconds later. "Petty Officer Carter, you have full engagement authorization from this moment forward. My judgment is yours. Make the call when you need to make it." Maya looked through the scope at the ridge. 6 people moving up. At Redstone, there had been at least 3, possibly 4. The gun crew, the loader, the commander. A larger element here meant either a larger weapon system or a secondary action she had not fully mapped yet. She tracked the movement, the way the 6 individuals were spaced, the way they were carrying their equipment, the specific distribution of weight that tells an experienced observer what kind of weapon is being transported, even when the weapon itself is not yet visible. She saw it at 1834, the heavy component, the piece that required 2 people to carry and that moved differently from everything else. Slower, more careful, with the specific reverence that people extend to things that can do enormous damage if dropped. Not a machine gun, a mortar system. Her stomach dropped exactly 1 degree. A mortar system changed the engagement geometry completely. A crew-served machine gun fires in a direct line. You find the gun, you find the crew, you neutralize both, and the threat is removed. A mortar fires in an arc. The weapon does not need line of sight to the target. The crew does not need to be where the rounds are going. And a mortar at this range from this ridge, with a prepared firing solution that had been calculated over 14 days of preparation, she was on the radio before she finished the calculation. Marsh, they have a mortar system, not a machine gun mortar. I need your perimeter shelters active right now. I need everyone not in a hardened position to get into one, and I need you to understand that neutralizing the crew is not enough. They will have pre-calculated firing solutions written down. If the crew goes down and the solutions are already set, someone else can walk up to that tube and complete the fire mission. He paused. 3 seconds, Marsh processing. Copy, he said, moving personnel to shelters. What do you need? I need to take the crew before they complete setup. Once the tube is planted and the elevation is set, the first round is 30 seconds away. I have to hit them before that. How long do you have? Maya watched the ridge. Watched the team moving with the mortar components. Calculated the assembly time for a system of that size against experienced hands. Maybe 8 minutes, she said. Maybe less. You have authorization, Marsh said. Go. She had been a sniper for 7 years. She had taken shots in conditions that people who have not done it describe as impossible, and people who have done it describe as very difficult. She had learned through repetition and discipline and a willingness to be uncomfortable for very long periods of time that most of what makes a shot impossible is the story you tell yourself about it before you take it. She did not tell herself a story. She found the commander first. He was the one giving direction, the one whose removal would create the maximum disruption to the assembly process. She tracked him across the ridge, found his pattern, found his rhythm, and when the wind dropped to its lowest point in the current cycle, she fired. The commander went down. Immediate chaos on the ridge. The remaining 5 individuals responded the way trained people respond to an unexpected casualty, fast, instinctive seeking. However, the assembly process interrupted in the precise moment she needed it interrupted. She cycled the bolt, found the component that mattered most. The bipod plate of the mortar base, the piece that, without it, the tube cannot be elevated and the weapon cannot be fired. It was lying on the rock beside the half-assembled system, and the individual who had been carrying it was now 3 meters to the left of it and moving further away looking for the source of the shot. She took the piece, not a person, the equipment. 980 meters. She hit the bipod plate with a precision that Reeves would later describe in the debrief as the single most controlled piece of marksmanship he had ever heard documented, because hitting a person requires finding center mass, but hitting a specific component of a weapon system at nearly a kilometer requires something beyond that, requires a relationship between the shooter and the physics of the bullet that is so practiced and so precise that the gap between intention and result has been reduced to almost nothing. The mortar could not fire. She was already finding the third target, the individual who was moving toward the tube, the one who was going to assess the damage and improvise a solution, the way trained people always try to improvise a solution because the mission does not stop because of one shot. She found him. She fired. He stopped moving toward the tube. The remaining 4 individuals on the ridge made a decision that Maya had seen made before, the decision that a mission is no longer viable, that the cost of continuing is higher than the objective justifies, that the correct tactical response is to withdraw and regroup and wait for a better moment. They moved off the ridge in the opposite direction from the base, fast and low, carrying nothing except themselves. She tracked them until they were out of effective range. Then she lowered her rifle, and she breathed. The base below was in hardened positions, and the radio was running, and somewhere Park was relaying information to command in the careful, steady voice of someone doing their job under pressure, and somewhere Marsh was coordinating the response to a threat that had been neutralized before it fully formed. Iron Gate was intact. 26 soldiers who had been 6 minutes from a mortar attack were in their shelters alive, unaware of how precisely calibrated the margin had been. 1902, Marsh's voice came through on the radio. Petty Officer Carter, report. Ridge is clear, Maya said. 3 shots. Mortar assembly interrupted base plate, disabled command element neutralized. Remaining personnel withdrew. No rounds fired at Iron Gate. A pause, then Marsh said something that no commanding officer had ever said to Maya Carter after an engagement. He said, "I know, not good shooting, not copy that, not thank you, I know." Like he had been watching the whole time and had seen exactly what she did and understood exactly what it cost and was not going to reduce it to a pat on the back or a procedural acknowledgement. "Come down when you are ready," he said. No rush. She stayed on the roof for another 20 minutes, not watching, not calculating, just present the way she allowed herself to be present in the specific minutes after something large had resolved fully inside the moment, not already in the next one. The sky over Iron Gate was the same desert sky as over Redstone, the same thick concentration of stars in the darkness above the ridge lines, the same indifferent and beautiful universe conducting its business without reference to what had just happened on one small roof in one small outpost in one small corner of the world. She thought about Olivia. She thought about Cole sitting on a crate with a coffee mug he was not drinking. She thought about Reeves saying, "You're going in that last category." She thought about Torres at OP2 finally logging the things he had been leaving out because they seemed too small to matter. She thought about Wallace's voice saying, "You were the best soldier I've ever been wrong about," and the way he had said it like it was something he had been working toward for a long time and had finally arrived at. She thought about Diaz's cousin on the east wall at Redstone, holding his position under fire. She thought about the 26 soldiers of Iron Gate currently emerging from hardened shelters, not knowing what had almost reached them. She thought about the next outpost, because there would be a next one. Command had implied it on the radio during the flight. The same network, the same operational pattern, on potentially 2 more positions in the region, with similar profiles and similar vulnerabilities. 2 more groups of people, close enough to going home that home had started to feel real. 2 more sets of ridgelines that nobody had looked at from the right angle yet. She thought about what Olivia had asked her, about whether it ever got lonely. And she thought about what she had said in response, about 30 people who don't know something is coming, about the people who know how to watch the ridge-keeping watch because not everyone knows how. It was not a romantic answer. It was not a noble answer. It was just the answer, the plain actual reason, the one that existed beneath all the other reasons, the one that was still there when everything else had been stripped away. Some people know where to look, and because they know, they have to keep looking. She picked up her rifle. She checked the chamber, always the same ritual, the same respect for the weapon and what it carries, and she slung it over her shoulder and picked up her pack and walked to the roof access door. Marsh met her at the bottom of the stairs. I had a cup of coffee in each hand, and he held one out to her and said nothing because nothing needed to be said in that specific moment, and he understood that. She took the coffee and they stood in the narrow corridor at the base of the stairs and drank it. After a minute, Marsh said, "Command wants to debrief you in the morning. Full engagement review. They also want to discuss the 3rd and 4th positions in the network." "I'll be ready at 0600, Maya said. "There's a bunk set up for you in the east wing, clean sheets." A pause. "Get some sleep. You've been awake for how long?" "A while," Maya said. "Sleep," Marsh said. It was not a suggestion. She walked toward the east wing. In the corridor, she passed Diaz. He was coming from the shelter area, still in his full kit helmet under his arm. He saw her and stopped. He looked at her the way people look at something they are trying to fit into a frame of reference that was not built to hold it. "We're okay," he said. It came out as a statement, but it was really a question. "You're okay," Maya said. He exhaled. It was the exhale of the whole night coming out of him at once, every hour of controlled tension releasing in one breath. "My cousin," he said. "He told my mom the sniper didn't even flinch." Maya looked at him. "Your cousin was on the east wall under fire and he held his position. He didn't flinch either." She started walking again. That's what soldiers do. She found the bunk in the east wing. She set her rifle against the wall within arm's reach, always every night, wherever she was, and sat on the edge of the bunk and put her hands on her knees and let the quiet settle around her. And because the night was over and the base was safe, and the people who depended on the watch being kept were still alive, she let later come. She felt the weight of Redstone and the weight of Iron Gate, and the weight of every moment she had spent watching ridgelines that nobody else was watching. She felt the 36 hours at Redstone that should not have required 36 hours. She felt the specific loneliness of being right before anyone is ready to believe you. She felt the cold of the concrete roof. She felt the 4.8 seconds between the first shot and the third. She felt all of it, the full unabridged weight of it, in the 15 minutes she allowed herself before she lay down and closed her eyes. She was asleep in 4 minutes. Downstairs, Marsh was on the radio with command. He was filing the engagement report. He spoke factually and without embellishment, the way good commanders file reports giving each event its accurate weight and no more. He described the mortar system. He described the assembly interruption. He described the 3 shots in their sequence and their outcomes. And then before closing the report, he added something that was not required by the reporting format, but that he felt needed to exist on the record. He said that the sniper who had saved Iron Gate had been in the air reading logs before she landed. He said that she had identified a 14-day pattern break in 22 minutes that his own staff had not identified in 2 weeks. He said that she had taken the right shot at the right target at the right moment and had done it so precisely that the weapon that would have killed his people never fired a single round. He said that every outpost in the network needed to know her name. And command, for the first time in a communication that had been clinical and procedural on their end, throughout went quiet for a moment before responding. When the voice came back, it said simply, "Noted." That night, across 2 outposts and a chain of command that stretched from a desert rooftop to a building with fluorescent lights and no windows, the name Maya Carter traveled through frequencies and reports and conversations in the specific way that names travel when they are attached to something real. Not the name of someone who had been given an opportunity. Not the name of someone who had proven a point. The name of a soldier who had looked at a ridge when nobody else was looking and understood what was there, and who had then done the only thing that mattered, the thing that all the training and all the discipline and all the cold nights on uncomfortable surfaces had been building toward. She had kept the people safe. That was the job. That had always been the job. And Maya Carter Navy, SEAL sniper, the reinforcement nobody wanted, and the soldier everyone needed, had done her job with a precision and a courage that the desert would hold in its silence long after the outposts were gone and the ridgelines were empty. And the only evidence that any of it had happened was the undeniable, unalterable fact that 30 soldiers at Redstone and 26 soldiers at Iron Gate had all gone home. Every single one of them.